But I'm really excited that such a large group came tonight. I mean, this is very exciting. I was expecting these to be very kind of small, intimate conversations with 3 or 4 people showing up, and it's great to see familiar faces and some new ones. So thank you very much all for coming. Today we're going to talk about creative composition, and these aren't workshops. This is just a discussion, right? We're all photographers. We all have experiences. We all have something to bring to the table. The only reason I put anything, I call it an agenda for lack of a better name, is just to remind us to talk about this long list of stuff that I came up with in my pointy head. And if you see other things, we'll have a chance to kind of bring other things that I might have forgotten about to the conversation. So today's topic, we all decided through that Facebook poll we were going to talk about creative composition. So for me, that's the basic rules and how I'm going to break them. Talk about things like visual weight and competent colors, how to frame your subject, how to separate your subject, points of view, repetitions, patterns, things like those are just the items that I came up with that I thought would be interesting to talk about. And like I said, along the way, as we go down a rabbit hole or diverge into another subject, I'm perfectly okay, because I'm hoping I'm just not going to stand up here and talk for 2 hours. If you guys are going to help me out, and we'll have a much more interactive experience. I'd like to start out with introductions. You already met me. My name's Jim. Again, thank you. Welcome. And let's see. This is my portrait studio, but I do a lot of different kinds of work. I do drone photography, commercial stuff, on-site stuff. And that's me. I shoot mostly Nikon, but I also have some Pentaxes, some other cameras. I'm kind of gear agnostic mostly. So let's go around the room, starting with Brian today.
I'm Brian. I've been shooting for maybe 2 years. I'm a Canon guy. I'm a hobbyist. I shoot a little bit of everything.
All right. Thanks. How about you, Tom?
Hi, my name is Tom. I've shot Canon film for years, and about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, a friend of mine turned me on to shooting digital with Nikon, and I'm shooting like that. Other than weddings, I like shooting anything that has people, places, things, or activities in it. Other than that, I keep it kind of limited.
Okay. Yes?
Me? Oh, no, we look at me or Matt. I'm Kristen Weston. I took a class with Judith on how to actually learn how to get off auto onto manual, which was the best thing I ever did. I shoot for myself, just for fun, and I have cameras, and I think that's fun. Yeah, I shoot for myself. It's fun.
Okay. Great.
I'm Matt. I shoot Canon, and I shoot for my grandchildren. I shoot for sports.
I'm Diana. I'm his wife, and he doesn't just shoot for his grandchildren. He's been shooting since he was a teenager, and I just started. He bought me lessons last year for Christmas from Judith, so I took 2 classes from her and fell in love with photography. So I like shooting pretty much anything except things or work.
I'm with you on the way. That's like a job.
Yes.
Leave that to people like Judith. Okay.
I'm Lyle. I've been dabbling in photography since about '93. Do it just for myself, although I have shot a few weddings, and that taught me to not shoot anymore. But I do, outdoor nature kind of stuff. I'll take portraits if people want me to. Just anything that looks interesting. For some reason, I have a thing about lighthouses. I really couldn't care less about them unless I have a camera in my hand. I've done some photography work for scientific research and things like that. It's just a variety of things, but I'm always looking to learn more.
Okay. Then we'll talk about workshops. How about you, Mike?
Let's see, I shoot Fuji mirrorless, and I tend to gravitate towards documentary, family, candid, people photography, which can include street. Do a little bit of real estate photography, only because I can get a couple of bucks when I do it. And that's about it.
Okay.
My name's Michael Lemke. I shoot Nikon and just about anything, everything. No desire to do weddings. Landscapes, animals, I like to shoot birds, mostly eagles whenever I get a chance. And starting to play around with some off-camera flash and doing some people things, and I think I'll stick to birds. They're more cooperative.
I have yet to get a bird to pose for me, so yeah.
Hi, good evening. My name is John. Enjoy shooting sports and action probably the most. I've taught photography for 10 years in a public school setting, and just looking for something to do tonight and come out.
Great.
I'm Annette. I shoot Nikon. Hobby, just for fun. Mostly, I like landscape. I like outdoor photography, waterfalls, and I also like nighttime long exposures like the city lights.
I'm this person who loves photography. I've always loved photography, but I just started a year ago. I shoot again.
Hi, I'm Brittany. I also just do wildcat photograph last year. I like shooting nature, flowers, animals.
So you guys have all taken to do this class. This is nothing like a formal photography course, and I highly recommend going and taking Judith's formal courses over there at MoCA, because that structure gives you a lot more in-depth, especially the labs, the assignments every week. We had got to go out and do that sort of stuff. This is very casual. In fact, we don't even know what we're going to do the next time we get together. It's going to be whatever we decide, on a Facebook poll or whatever that people want to see next, or maybe something happens in the news. I just want to keep these very, very laid back and casual, so, not really consider this any kind of substitute for a formal photography course, more of a bunch of photography training. Anyway, so that's introductions. Let's start with talking about some of the basic photography rules. Who wants to take a guess with the very first one I have on this one? Go ahead.
That's the horizon shooting level.
It's on there, but it's not the first one. Rule of thirds, that's right. So, show of hands, who knows all about the rule of thirds? Basically, the rule of thirds says that, wow, that's a terrible. Basically says that in composition, we find things more comfortable when they're shifted a little bit away from the center of the frame. So you notice Janelle's sign is kind of lined up with this imaginary line that I've drawn a third of the way back. So build, kind of mentally put a tic-tac-toe board on your frame. Those are the lines you kind of can use in composing to the rule of thirds. Especially the most important part of the portrait, her eyes are right there along that third line. And the same thing with Matt here. Not only is Matt kind of lined up with this third rule, but also his eyes are very, very close to this intersection. The intersection is really the most powerful place on your frame than those lines are. So a lot of times, especially with people compositions, but this holds true for landscape and everything else, the rule of thirds is a very good way to add a little bit more power to your basic composition, moving from snapshots to more of a portrait. And again, my apologies for not having real PowerPoint here. I had some new transitions on a lot of these slides, so we'll just go with it. I got some really experienced photographers in this room who want to add more about rule of thirds. Mostly because I don't want to talk about myself.
So the other thing to consider is how the subject's looking relative to where you place them.
That's a different rule.
What would you call that rule?
That's the rule of space. So be a good. You're a great straight man. So here, let's first use that as an example. Matt's space is going this direction. You notice there's a lot of negative space over here. We've given Matt a place to look, right? And that's called the rule of space. So that holds true for people, and it holds true for any moving subject. So Here's my airplane. I've given this airplane somewhere to go. I've given it some negative space out here. If I had cropped it differently, right here, and put this negative space behind the aircraft, it would look like the aircraft's getting ready to smash into the side of my plane. So the rule of space is slightly different than the rule of thirds. It's usually just there to give, like I said, people a place to look, or any subject a place to look, and any moving object a place to go. Yeah, careful with that. You got a short presentation. We're not going to go. This is a really weird space. It's flex space. This is all a warehouse side, and there was exactly one receptacle in the whole room. I was like, oh, why was that? So I had to go tapping in more receptacles. Very strange. Any other questions about rule of space, or any other comments or want to add to that?
There's I don't know what they call it in street photography. There's some desire on some street photographers' part to create tension in the frame by purposely breaking rules, and sometimes it's like instead of having, if a person is walking right to left, you don't put them over on the right, you actually put them in the left like they're walking out of the frame to create some tension.
Yeah, so once we go over all these rules, we're going to talk about breaking those rules and why. So you're absolutely right, Michael.
It's whether it's the rule of thirds and the rule of space, and not the law of thirds and the law of space.
Yeah, all rules are meant to be broken, right? Another rule to pay attention to most of the time. Wow, you can't even see that, can you? Rule of odds. Odd numbers of things tend to be more pleasing to our visual system than even numbers of things. Think about spokes on a wheel on a car. How often do you see a 4-spoke wheel? Very rarely. It would look silly. It would look like an X. So usually, if you look at it now, most of the time on cars, the number of spokes on the wheel are an odd number. And 3 and 5 are the most common odd numbers for our brains to pick up and say, that's a very pleasing amount of things. So in this case, there are 3 pictures in a row. And sorry, you can't see that on this projector very well. So that's the rule of odds.
I thought that was just my preference, to have 3 things in a row. I didn't know there was actually something there.
Yeah.
I didn't know why I turned that light off, if that was...
Well, the reason I have that light on instead of this overhead is because you really can't even see this with the big neon lights, the big fluorescent lights on. So it's okay. We'll live with it. These are just examples out of the library, so it's not really like you want to see how technically correct or not these pictures are. They're just my examples. So that's rule of odds. And you're right. It's very common. Look at paintings. Look at Renaissance paintings. Like how many archways there are. There's always either 3 or 5. There's never an even number of archways.
Now feel look.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah.
Feel look.
Okay, everybody. You can be counting all the spokes on the wheel every time they go to a stop sign. The other one that I wanted to mention, level the horizon. Man, and we as photographers, aren't we picky about this? I see an unleveled horizon in a picture, and I can't see anything else in the picture until it's level. Then, if I have a level horizon, I can begin to explore the picture. Maybe it's a little OCD, maybe that comes with the territory a bit with photographers, but unless the horizon is level,
But there are times when the horizon is not level.
well,
I mean, if you're up in a hilly country or something,
yes.
and where you want to take a picture of is on the side of the hill goes like this, and if you make it level, then all of a sudden, the trees are growing.
Yeah, but in those cases, you have those trees to give you an indicator that they should be on an incline. If you're staring at the horizon on the ocean, now you can't just use a little level that's in your camera or a bubble level on your, because it could be that you're skewed from the horizon, and so even though your camera is level, the horizon may not be, and you have to go with the way the horizon looks before the picture is just not going to seem right. So a lot of times, try to get that in camera best you can, but use a grid so you can level it up with a grid. Don't use the little inclinometer that's in your camera or whatever, because it may not give you what you want. Because when you fix it in post, of course, what happens? You lose the edges, right? You get lower resolution. You may lose something that's close to the edge that may be important. So try to get that in camera best you can. thoughts and comments on those 4 rules?
To me, the horizon, and just recently, I've seen a few pictures of just, I mean, it just totally, I forget about what's in the subject. Because I'm looking at a horizon, I mean, it's the ocean, clear, nothing in the horizon, it wasn't even close.
And you wonder why it didn't leak off the edge.
Yeah, right.
You know, it was a great shot of a kid jumping off a little sand dune. But it's like, I saw the kid, and it's like, I stopped just like that. And it's like, you gotta be kidding me.
Right.
You know, why would you shoot? I mean, it was that bad. It was like,
Yeah. And like I said, as photographers, we spot it right away because we've dealt with it so much. I think even the laymen, they look at that and I think subconsciously they realize there's something a little off about the picture even though they don't know what it is. And that is distracting, right? Even on a subconscious level, it's preventing people from connecting with the intended subject. And so it's really important to have that right level. Anything else on these 4 rules? All right, so let's talk about breaking. Sorry, my transition's not working. Oh man, this guy really sucked. Okay, so this was supposed to all fill out in nice animations, but not. This was taken down in California last month. That's my son walking on a walking bridge on a path. Breaking the rule of thumbs for the sake of symmetry. So you want to get a perfectly symmetrical something in your shot, be it a building or in this case a bridge or whatever. But be very deliberate about it. Take your time and truly line up. See how it's perfectly lined up left to right. It's not skewed, it's not left to right. Just take your time, spend a little effort, and make sure if you're going to make a symmetrical shot, that it's clear to everybody that was your intention, right? I intended to break the rule of thirds because I'm going for symmetry, and therefore the symmetry needs to be really, really spot on. Any other times when breaking the rule of thirds, like Michael was talking about, that visual tension? Sometimes you want to have somebody literally walking off of the thing and building that. Other examples of when you might want to break the rule of thirds? This picture here that you can't see at all is that's kind of a hair flip picture. Half the girl's face is in the frame. That was another example of breaking the rule of space. So instead of having her somewhere for her to look, she's kind of looking off this direction, but all the activity is over here. The subject is not the actual model space. The subject is her hair. So, be intentional. In this picture, these 2 gondoliers are talking on your side, and it's two people, not 3. It's an even number. But in this particular case, when I thought about it, it's like, why is that not bothering me? And I realized because these guys are not the subject. The subject is the conversation they're having. They're facing each other. There's 2 of them, so they're obviously talking to each other. And so the subject is the conversation, not necessarily the 2 people. So now there is one subject. So it's still not. Other times when you might break that rule of odds. I mean, if you shoot like a flock of birds, you don't have a choice.
to discuss that. It's not that you've got 2 people there, but you have 1 pair.
Fair enough.
Same thing with a flock of birds. Maybe a dozen geese, but it's 1 flock.
You know how birds fly in that V pattern? You know why one line of that V is always longer than the other? There's more birds on that side. You're right. And then when is it okay to not level your horizon? When you're doing it intentionally. This is called a Dutch tilt, if anybody doesn't know. When you purposely tilt the frame to provide, in this case I wanted to show a little bit more motion. Even though these bikes were in motion, because I'm getting this family dead on, I don't see the motion in the wheels, so I decided to give it a little bit more motion by giving it that Dutch tilt. And like I said, it needs to be deliberate, at least 10 degrees, maybe 15 degrees, so that it's really clear to everybody that, it was the Batman fight scene. It's truly a tilt and not a mistake.
So can you elaborate? I'm still trying to understand how the Dutch tilt. Is it because it's kind of like throwing bikes going downhill? Or how is that?
Yeah, kind of. You know how you're riding a bike and you turn a corner, it kind of gives you lean into the shot, because of inertia, you've got to compensate for that. So anytime you put something on a tilt, whether it's on the side of the object or front of the object, it tends to give the impression in our brains that that thing is in motion. Any other times that you want to break those rules? Sure. You could. You could.
Just one.
Yeah. There's, hey, it's your artistic choice, right?
Yeah. Something else, so you have to rearrange what you intended.
Yeah.
Or like sports, we do a lot of sports, and sometimes you might just want to focus on, you want to show action. He tends to do a great job showing the whole thing. I tend to try to focus on individual players.
Yeah.
And this last game we did point out, but it's not telling a story. So I think sometimes break that rule in order to tell a story.
Yeah, and isn't that a hard balance, right? Especially in sporting events, there is the individual, and that's great because it's focused and it's clear what the subject is. Somewhere in the middle is a more interesting story, and beyond that, now you've got too much. It's too much clutter. You can't put everything in the frame, or it just takes the viewer too long to figure out what it is your intention is. So that balance is we'll talk a little bit about that in another slide. Next, I want to talk a little bit about visual weight. Can you grab me one? Thanks. Visual weight. Different things in your image have different weights. Imagine your photograph and it's literally sitting on a balance scale. Luminance is one thing that has different visual weights. Bright things have more visual weight than dark things. Colors. Warmer colors have more visual weight than cooler colors. The reds and the oranges have more visual weight, thank you very much, than the blues and the greens do. Size has visual weight. The larger objects in your frame are going to have more visual weight than the smaller things in your frame. Even the lines in your composition, whether they're bold lines or thin lines or whatever, those change visual weight. And even shapes. The way our brains process things, triangles and circles have more visual weight than rectangles and more complex polygons. Goes back when we were surviving in the jungles, and fangs were rectangular and eyeballs were predators and were round, and so we just developed these things as we're more attuned to those shapes than other shapes. Same thing with a lot of these colors. That's why we have more green receptors in our eyes than any other color, because there's more green around. We have to differentiate more shades of green in the jungle than any other color. Anyway. Pierre Mondrian, anybody know this guy? Pierre Mondrian, he was a French artist, and he spent most of his later part of his career really looking at this whole visual weight thing, and he decomposed all of his pictures into these series. He's most famous for this series of paintings he did. But notice, with all that in mind, how well balanced this painting is, right? The blue is a cooler color, but there's more reds, there's more warmer colors over there, even though it's a larger subject. So he spends a lot of his time kind of decomposing this whole concept of visual weight down to these compositions that kind of demonstrated that whole thing. So I just grabbed this. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of water. Somebody's got to have a comment on it. You teach this in school, certainly. You have something to say on visual weight.
You're doing a great job. I find it interesting that my eyes are more, as far as the lines, the horizontal thicker lines. And I don't know if it's because one side I read left to right. Is why I'm more see the horizontal lines more than the weight of them.
I think it has to do with the weird aspect ratio you're seeing. This is kind of compressed, as opposed to the more. I don't think the lines, the vertical and the horizontal lines, in this particular piece, on this screen, they're the same. So it's just a weird squish aspect ratio of this projector right here.
Because here you're looking at a rectangle, and here you're looking at a square.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's talk about framing your subject. Oh man, these turned out terrible, isn't it? Okay, so you can use a lot of different things to help frame your subject. In this case, you can't see it, but there's some foliage in the foreground here in front of the model. There's some foliage behind the model up over there. And altogether that forms kind of a natural frame around the subject that really separates her from the background. Everybody in Hampton Roads has done the under the pier shot, right? So what do we like about the pier more than anything is this great natural frame, right? Everybody looks good in here because it creates this wonderful natural frame. Even the surf on the bottom creates a fourth part of the segment of the frame there.
You don't have to worry about excess sun.
Yeah, and you can shoot it in midday. Actually, the best time to shoot is in midday because you've got all that light coming in, and there's nowhere else around the beach that the light looks anywhere close to good unless you bring a ton of modifiers with you. So, if you happen to shoot at midday, jump under the pier, get that light. But yeah, the framing is really what I'm trying to show off here. And then Cassie over here on this side, she's wearing that fur parka. And again, the fur parka kind of frames the face. It brings your eye directly to the subject, which is her eyes and her freckles that are really the part of this picture that's really important.
Is her hair intended in the second frame? The way it's across the shoe?
Yeah. So that's her hair, and she's got like dark hair but really light highlights and streaks at the bottom. So it's kind of falling across her face.
Her frame and then here's the frame.
My grandmother was an artist. She always pointed out triangles.
Yeah, you see that in her face?
Your face has two eyes and nose for a triangle. You bring the mouth in, you bring the chin in. She's got a fairly triangular face, but it's framed in triangular as well.
Yep. We'll talk about that as well.
Where is that pier?
What's that?
Where is that pier?
I think this is the Lynnhaven Pier.
Or it might be the other one.
No, I think that's the Lynnhaven.
We're on Shore Drive.
Yeah.
On Shore Drive.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see these as well either. So, these are again terrible projector thing. I was thinking about just taking that TV from the other room and putting it on a curtain and rolling it off. I guess I'll have to do that if we end up in another room later on, because this reproduction is awful. Here I'm using bokeh to separate the subject. So bokeh is, who wants to give a good definition of bokeh? Or as the Japanese call it, bokeh. Come on. What do you do? Yeah?
So it's actually my MO. That's what I like to shoot. I'm fortunate enough to have a 400 2.8, and I keep it at 2.8 a lot of times, and a 200 f2. So to throw that background, way out of focus, and to have that subject, it's just like your SI covers. You look at them, you have that player, that subject jumping right out of the page at you, and all of your emphasis, goes right to the subject's eyes, and everything else is just nice and creamy behind it to keep that focus.
Right. So basically what happens is when you have a large aperture at 4 or lower number, larger aperture, the larger your aperture, the more narrow your depth of field is going to be, right? So if you have a subject here, and even, this is some what's that little grass stuff you see on tabletops, right? Even the little grass in front of her is soft and out of focus, and it's only this far in front of her. And everything behind her is soft and out of focus because my depth of field in this particular shot, I'm about 8 feet away from her, probably only about that deep before it really starts to fall away quickly. And that helps separate her from the background. That's a hotel lobby. If you're in a situation where you don't have a beautiful background, guess what? Just blur it out and it turns wonderful. It's amazing what you can turn into a really nice background. You can turn anything into a nice background if you have the ability to open your aperture, bring that depth of field really in tight, and frame your subject with bokeh.
Sometimes when you do that, especially like you're talking about a hotel lobby, a lot of times there's lights in the background. Or Christmas is coming up here soon.
Yeah.
Right, lights in the background. You do that bokeh, and it kind of blurs all in. It makes a nice, appealing background to your picture. Just something that really stands out.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to grab some of the longer focal lengths if you have them available to shoot some of your portraits or things like this. Yeah, you'll have to stand off. You might be halfway across the yard when you're shooting some of the pictures. But yeah, your three factors that are control your depth of field. You have your, what?
Distance to subject.
Distance to subject,
focal
right.
length of the lens.
Yeah.
And the aperture.
Right, as you mentioned, the aperture. So shoot it wide open, get as close as you can, and put a long lens on. You know, and you can get some beautiful
But
stuff.
when you go with the long lens, be careful about the camera shake.
Sure, you know, definitely be cognizant if you need to rest it or steady it or whatever.
Yeah, and know your lens too, because not all lenses are super sharp and wide open. A lot of times you have to stop it down 1.5, 2 stops before it really turns crisp. So if sharpness is primary, you know your lens. Like I said, go out and shoot it. Go to DxO Mark and look it up. Whatever works for you. But know where your lenses are sharp and know when to use them so that you get the desired result. You can't keep going out and shooting and learning your equipment.
You also gotta be careful when you're doing that. Don't get too shallow with that field based on like for her eyes are not on the same plane.
Right.
So you end up creating a soft eye if you have too shallow with that field.
Right. And that depends on those factors, right? If I'm right up close to her, that depth of field is gonna be razor thin. And I'm gonna have to drop to F4 or something to get both eyes in focus. Even your auto-focusing system, a lot of times they'll catch the lashes, which are of higher contrast than eyeballs, and so you'll end up forward focusing. So a lot of times if you really got to get the eyeball tack sharp, you really have to manual focus.
So these depth of field calculators you can get for your phone, how good are they?
The problem is that they don't take into account the nuances of various camera lens combinations. It's a general calculation. Nothing beats going out and knowing your particular gear, where it is sharp and where it works, and are you really going to get that 1/3 in front, 2/3 in back kind of thing? Does that really work? Because that's what the calculators are all going to tell you, but it's not always. In my experience, it's not always the case. Anything else on book? Okay, sometimes you can separate your subject with light, and so in this case I've got a low-key portrait, and so I'm just using the darkness to separate my subject from the background. That was not a dark background by any means. In fact, it was a white wall. I just happen to have a good 5 stops difference between the light behind her and the light on her. And so you don't have to have a black background to do low-key photography. You just have to have a difference of at least 4 stops of light between whatever's coming off your background and whatever you're shooting. In fact, you can do low-key photography in broad daylight with a little bit of flash and a little bit of practice. And then the third thing, tell you, this has got to be great. But hey, we're going quicker because I don't have these great transitions to talk about. In this particular one, the original image was this young lady as she's on these stone pillars, but she's in a much larger frame, and so the notice was, hey, come in close. Get rid of all the distractions away from your subject and make them the focal point. And that, a lot of times, will help you bring your subject out, because there's not a lot of distractions. What did I miss? What are other ways you can bring your subject out, help separate them from the background besides the examples in the book?
Color contrast. That last one, is that Virginia Beach, Alabama?
Yeah, that's the little waterfall that's that way. Yep. It's on from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning, and 3 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the afternoon, not daylight savings time, not weekends. So anytime a photographer has available to shoot there, it's not on. It's only there so when the people that work in that industrial park go in and out of work, there's water. That's the only time it's on. City of Virginia Beach, Chicago.
Just to dovetail on your middle image there.
You know exactly where it is.
Yeah.
What's that?
The worst part is from that description, we know exactly where
Yeah,
you're talking
right.
You obviously did some nice creative lighting there. Don't be afraid just to drop your background a couple stops too. So if you want to try, if you feel comfortable using your flash on your camera, underexpose your background, by a couple stops, and and then just light your subject appropriately, for that to make it pop.
Yeah, and you can do it with with a speed light if you've got high speed sync, because really what you're trying to, you just got to do something, bring your shutter speed way, really fast, so your background is practically black. Now bring in your subject with those same settings, just like your subject one. Yeah. Be a whole class. Low-key photography and data. Don't be afraid to shift your point of view. We see the world from this level and this level, right? We're not bugs. We don't fly around. We see things from our eye level. Don't be afraid to change your perspective. A field of flowers is amazing to shoot from the ground up. Get the light through the petals instead of on top of the petals. Don't be afraid to raise your camera up over your head and get a slightly different perspective overhead. That's the reason I love my tilty screen on my camera, because I can actually compose doing this. I was doing it this weekend at the ping pong tournament, so I could get a slightly different view of the players than anybody else can. It doesn't take a whole lot. Drones are great. I love drone photography because you can't tell what this is, but it's looking down on the surf. And drones give me a perspective I can't get otherwise. I can't fly. I can't go 50 yards out in the ocean and take a shot back at the beach myself. But, that's a great tool to give you a different perspective. Macro photography, like I said, get down. Don't be afraid to get down low, or get a tilty screen camera if you don't have one, and put the camera on the ground. Don't be afraid of doing that, because there's a lot of interesting things in the world that we never notice because we have this fixed perspective. We have this eye line that we look at. Think of how about a high school desk, right? Very pedestrian, nothing interesting there. But I bet if you took your camera and shot it up at the bottom and all the boogers and the gum, I bet they might have an interesting composition there, right? It's something we don't, you just don't see it. It's there, but we don't see it because that's our perspective. So don't be afraid of doing that. This is Monticello Arcade. When I put the camera on the ground and I shot it so I could get all these leading lines of the tile, I got a great view of the atrium above again. And sorry about this. Projector does a terrible job of screwing this up. If only I had a model, some kind of subject here for all these leading lines to come and converge to, it would have been a great shot, but I didn't have anything that day. You can go back when there's a partly cloudy day, and a nice model, maybe a couple of right there. So don't be afraid to change that perspective.
Especially for sports, especially field sports. If you're shooting out on a football field or what have you. I carry a three-legged stool that's a little bit lower than this, or I'll sit on the ground. This way your background is much further away than if you're shooting down from standing or in the stands where you have, the field next to the person as your background. So going back a couple slides, we can throw that background out of focus and have that nice creamy background, have that subject, be nice and sharp in your picture. So and also gives them a much more powerful position. When you're shooting up at a player or a person, like that also.
Yeah,
so it's kind of bigger than life. Yeah.
You can also use the point of view to emphasize a feature, right? Depending on that angle.
Yeah.
Your eyes more inclined to go towards the closest part or wherever the lens is going.
Yeah, especially with wider angle lenses, you're going to get that perspective. It's going to be much more exaggerated than leading lines. We talked about some leading lines. So here's the kind of pixel I stole this picture. Basically, it was just an example of showing how this leading line of this path brings you to the subject. There's also another leading line of a fog, kind of brings your eye to the subject as well.
Tree itself. So the tree itself is also a leading line, right? So we tend to follow, I follow the tree up. Makes me look at the sky.
I guess if you had a nest of birds or something, and that was a subject to look at, you might say that, yeah. In this shot I took at VIR, the leading line of the racetrack not only tells me that this guy's in the lead, but also tells me the story, right? Who's next and who's behind them, and in what order are the cars racing. So the leading line doesn't necessarily just lead to the subject; it can also walk you through the rest of the story, right? Here's an example of leading lines of the per dam, and the model was positioned so that all the lines of the dam are bringing it to the. What else about leading lines?
Like for portrait photography, you could use like their arms and fingers to help lead your focus.
Mm-hmm. Just cranking through this. Repetition and patterns. So this is at Mondavi Winery. We've all had one Mondavi Winery, right? This is at Mondavi Winery in Napa Valley. This was a very big cask room, but because I shot it in such a way that you don't see the beginning or the end of the series of barrels, your brain just says, oh, this goes on forever. So this can be miles long. And you can create some really interesting illusions by just looking at a repetition of things. Maybe it's just 5 things, but slice off the front and back of the things on the end, and now it could be 1,000 things in your brain. Make the assumption that it's that.
Would it be better to shoot in landscape mode though for that? Because that would give it a feeling of being longer.
I had a couple with landscape mode. Here's the problem with that is this is a really dark room, and I had very little light. And in landscape mode, the light fell off so quickly that I really lost it, and there really wasn't much there to have. So in this particular case, this shot turned out about as well as it could. But you're right, if you had a series of things and you wanted to take it in a landscape mode, depending on what you have and if the composition works, sure, absolutely. And then patterns. Somebody mentioned triangles before. Leading lines tend to form triangles. We got a whole vanishing point going on over here. So this is a wall. These are some steps. There's some other stuff. And then the building itself is kind of in a 2-point perspective. It's forming its own triangle as that building goes down the street at a diagonal or at a 90 degrees to that wall. And so now you have this beautiful set of triangles. And when we find those basic shapes in our compositions, they tend to be much, much stronger.
I love the one top right.
The tower?
Yes,
Yeah.
tower. Because, when you typically see pictures of people who are there vacationing, they take the whole thing. So you have this base, but most of the picture is just sky with a little bit of metal.
Mm-hmm.
So I love how that's done. Because it continues to go up.
Yeah, we all know what the Eiffel Tower
Yeah.
looks like, and it's been shot. There's no new picture of the Eiffel Tower to be had, right? So why bother to shoot the whole thing? We all know it. You're exactly right. If you're going to shoot something that's that famous and that well known, use a little section of it and do something more creative. I think you're dead right on there. But that's really nice. I'm not sure I agree with Petitpitzel's division of these triangles, but I could sort of see this one maybe a little bit. I'm struggling with this triangle here.
I'm with you.
Yeah, that one was a little, I didn't really see it. This one's very clear. This one I'm not quite sure on. Here I see the parallel between the foreground object and the background object, and maybe I can draw that kind of 3D box that they're trying to demonstrate there. It is strong, and it's got a great visual weight, right? You've got this object over here. It's physically smaller, but we know the buildings are bigger than lampposts, and we've got this in the foreground, so it balances very, very well. Golden spirals, golden rectangles, Fibonacci sequence phi, whatever you want to call it. Personally, I haven't been sold that there's enough scientific evidence that there's really a biological golden anything, nautilus shells and a couple of flower petals aside. That there's all these ratios between all of our major joints, and all animals have this, and plant life and whatever. But people have been studying it forever, right? Leonardo da Vinci's famous illustration of man that shows phi and the golden ratio in that drawing, and so people have been pondering it for quite a long time. Like I said, Fibonacci sequence tends toward 1.618. For me, I find it a stretch to say, oh, this is a beautiful golden spiral in this particular composition. It seems to me that they kind of took the golden spiral, golden rectangles and wedged it into this picture.
Yeah, I
But
wouldn't
you
see
might
it.
see something very different than me. So, but if it's a tool that helps you build interesting compositions and you see it in there, more power to you. Because I like the composition of the picture. I'm not necessarily sold that the golden rectangle is really there and helping form that particular thing. What do you guys think?
I wouldn't have seen it had it not been for the lines they put on it.
I don't see it with the lines on it.
Actually, half a little on it, that's it.
I'd have got the triangle.
Yeah, this one's
That's
pretty
very
clear,
easy.
right? This one is. And I think of the 4 examples, I think it's as
The
far as
other one with the Eiffel Tower, I mean, I look at the tower itself as being a triangle.
Yeah, I would have seen, yeah, you're right, I would have seen that as a triangle, which
And
caused that to
then
be a
other
triangle.
triangles
and then-
working off of that,
Yeah, maybe.
just be a horizon,
Yeah.
that should be out of level.
But whether these are good or bad examples, the point I think the Petapixel was trying to make with this illustration is, if you can find those simple basic shapes in your composition, and you can slightly shift and change and bring those simple compositional elements into your image, you're going to have a strong image. That's the point.
Just a note on the Eiffel Tower, I've seen it a few times, and the first time I saw it, I was, what? I could not believe it was brown. Brown. I mean, I think in most of the pictures you see it, it's usually dark and gold colored line, but it is brown.
Yeah. Well, it's made of iron. They have to paint it every once in a while, so. You
So
know.
they pretty much paint it, once they get done, they start over.
She's a good picture.
I was there in 2000, and they were getting ready for. No, I was in there in 1999. They were all getting ready for the Y2K celebration. So the Eiffel Tower is completely covered up. Notre Dame was covered up. Opera House was covered up. Everything was under scaffolding because they all wanted all this stuff done for the Y2K celebration. It's a waste of time. Oh, well, it is what it is. Are we close to? I'm for about done with this. Okay, so here's some of my other thoughts. Compose for your intended output. So if you're composing for a large print, think about the details, right? Because in a large print, those details are going to come out. They may not be something that you see in a thumbnail, but they're going to be there. So, compose for the details. You're going to do a 20x30 print or some big thing. The details are all going to be very, very important. If you're composing for Facebook, Facebook is still typically a rectangular format supported social media, but the details aren't nearly as important as some of those other compositional elements that we're talking about. Instagram, completely different altogether. It's all about that tiny little square thumbnail. So what are people doing with Instagram? They're going like this, right? They're looking at 200, 300 pictures at a swipe. What do they stop on? They stop on the interesting composition that is perfectly crystal clear in that tiny little thumbnail. So it's important to have an incredibly simple concept if you're going to be posting for Instagram and trying to get people's attention, right? It's a different medium. So think about that when you're out shooting. What's my intention with this shot? And a lot of times, I'll take 3 or 4 or 5 different compositions of exactly the same thing because I may want to print it, or I may want to throw it on Instagram, or I may want to post it on Facebook or whatever. But I know I need something different for each one of those media. And of course, if it's for a customer, then you've got to go with whatever the customer is wanting. You've got to go with that. So it's important to really know the strengths of whatever medium that you're going to be outputting this to. Tell a clear but complete story. Like I said, the Instagram thumbnail has to be very, very clear and very, very simple. But the story has to be complete. It's a much better and interesting picture if there's a story to be told. And I'm not saying that every detail of the story has to be inside the frame. It could be that there's a subject, there are some clues in the frame, and there's something about it that says, oh, there's something going on off the frame, but I can tell that. Maybe the subject is looking off in the distance while something is happening in the background. There's an incomplete story, but it's composed in such a way that it's asking you to complete the story. Right?
That is, to me, one of the things I struggle with in photography. Because I'm going, I don't want to tell a story to you. I find something that I think is attractive to me. I want to take a picture, whether it's the sunset or the grandchild or et cetera. But people sit there and they go, but you're not telling me a story. I don't want to tell you a story. Can't I just show you something pretty at the moment that grabs my eye?
Yeah, but your grandkids are, you don't just take pictures of them sleeping, right? I mean, they're doing something.
I haven't yet, but there's a thought.
They're doing something, right? And that's part of the story, right? The thing that your grandchildren are doing is the story, not just the fact that you have a picture of your grandchild, right?
So then let's say everybody's done the sunrise down at the ocean front. We'll use that as our story.
Mm-hmm.
The sun's coming up. What else am I supposed to tell a story about? Everybody says, you should be leaving your leading line, should take me to the story. What story? It's sand, it's water, it's the sunrise coming up. Can't you just enjoy the beauty of that sunrise? Can't I capture that?
Sure,
What else
absolutely you
is
can.
your story?
Well, I typically wait around for something else to happen. I wait for a flock of pelicans to fly in the frame. Boom, now the story is the flight of pelicans, or a boat, or dolphins, or whatever. I look for something else to really complete the story, because we all know what the sunrise and sunset and the water all look like. Add some other element, and now your picture is that much stronger.
I don't know if it was this group or a different group that was down at the marina out in Tumblr. And there was a shot that somebody took of the sunset, and then somebody, I think the person who took the shot made some comment, I wish the guy with the boat wasn't there. No. The guy with the boat is what makes it not just the sunset. Sunset.
Yeah.
I mean, at least to me.
Yeah.
I've seen their window down a few times before.
So many times I look
went across the water. It's just,
yeah, so he's waiting for the boat to get out of the shot. To me, that's crazy. I see so many beautiful images that have no subject. Like that Monticello picture. I love that Monticello arcade picture, but I hate it because I have no subject. Beautiful leading lines. It's technically, you couldn't tell, but technically it's a really great picture. But since I have no
symmetry on the subject, or symmetry on the there was the subject.
I know, I was going to say,
yeah, but leading lines, you want some payoff, right? You want some reward for following those lines to something.
Maybe.
And what you got in that particular shot was the back door. That's why I say I need to go back one day when there's a partly cloudy day, because the clouds of the atrium is a very interesting element. But put like a beautiful couple or something in there as a reward for all those leading lines. Your eye follows it in, and voila, now there's a subject. I think that'd be a much stronger picture.
Another way of looking at it is not so much I'm trying to tell this story, but I'm trying to give things to my viewer so that they can make their own story for the photograph.
I like that arcade shot without somebody in it. I like leading lines. I like black and white. I like that look. So I would take that and print that and stick it on my wall.
And it's really good because the guy who was supposed to do that picture was out there in the boat at the sunset.
I would put that on my wall and think it's fantastic.
Yeah, maybe as an abstract, sure.
Yeah.
You know, so I've got pictures on my wall of things like just, a guardrail because it made an interesting pattern. So really now the guardrail is the subject. But
did your guardrail tell us?
Well, no, not really.
See, that's what I'm doing.
But I'm not looking for, in that particular case, I was just looking for a piece of geometry to, put on the wall. I wasn't looking for a photograph to tell a story. Yeah. So back to
a
your...
photograph doesn't have to tell us.
No.
It's something interesting is that I'm a retired architect, and for years I've taken photographs of buildings we've done or buildings we're going to renovate, but usually the ones we wanted that we would use as representative representations of our work. When I would take a picture of that building, there are many times I did not want the people in there, because what I wanted to show through was the building.
Right.
It was the architecture, like in the Sullivan Arcade, is all the railings and the columns and things like that.
All that indirect lighting and all that stuff.
Right, and occasionally, if you had the right kind of person in there that gave the building scale or things like that, it was good. But So especially for me as a street photographer, I had to fight the urge to be real selective with the people, you know, and you do have to be in street photography, but sometimes what you wouldn't want in an architectural photograph, you would want in a street photography shot.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Well, I know your street photography tells a story,
Mm-hmm.
so I understand the concept of tell a story. But I'm like, you always have to tell a story.
Sometimes the subject is the story.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a beautiful sunset with,
Yeah, I
you know,
think
that,
like that.
I go to, Falling Water, well, I used to go every year, but, if you're not familiar with it, it's a house that is built with a bunch of balconies, a cantilever over a waterfall, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Anyhow, there's an area on the other side of the screen where it's great to take pictures of the house from. But you go over there and there'll be a tour group up on the upper balcony. And about the time they go in, another group comes out and
Yeah.
I have stood there for an hour or more, you know, just waiting. Okay, now they're about to go in. Oh, here comes another one. And then, you know, so by the time I've hit that point where all the groups are inside, nobody's on balconies, I can get a shot. I've waited over an hour for that.
Yeah. Of course, there are techniques you can use to kind of ghost out all those people with long exposure and other things. But, you know, you also get borders and foliage and things around.
Yeah, well, I guess I could have taken multiple shots. Okay, they're on the upper balcony, but not here, and then I could have pieced it together later.
Mm-hmm. Do that too.
Don't be afraid to turn around and the picture may not be in front of you. It could be behind you, at least for me personally. Like,
Well, in that case, it wouldn't.
yeah, no, not for yours. If we're talking about the beach, if we're talking about the Eiffel Tower, you know, I'll have better pictures by shooting the people that are taking the pictures, or you know what's going on, and they're posing and things like that to you know, usually get some good luck that way.
Mm-hmm. The perfect Eiffel Tower shot would be staring at the guy's camera lens and getting the Eiffel Tower in the reflection of the lens, right?
Yeah, actually, yeah, I can share with the group later. I got some stuff like.
What's that?
Want to go on a road trip?
Not the Paris. Next, consider all this composition and try to get it in camera. I know we can all crop and post, and we got some wonderful tools we never had before, and it just gets too convenient to say, oh, I'll fix that in post. Take your time and get it as close as you possibly can in camera if you possibly can. One, you're going to have the highest resolution possible if you thought about and cropped out all the distortion. You framed your picture in camera with all the distortion, all the clutter removed because you stepped forward, you zoomed in, and you got to the picture. You've thought about that composition, you've kind of worked it up in your head, and if you think about that stuff deliberately, it'll literally cause you to slow down, and you'll end up with much better pictures. And more importantly, you'll spend less time in post-processing instead of outtaking more pictures. So that's my philosophy on it anyway. Not to say I didn't take 3,000 pictures this weekend.
When I take a shot, I like to intentionally overshoot just a little bit. Like I would get it, if I was going to take a photo of you right here, I would intentionally focus out to here, up a little. That way I can come back later and say, yeah, I should have cropped that a little bit. But I can never come back and say, nah, I really should have made that taller. Or I should have got more of what was behind you. I'd rather go ahead and get just a little bit more and then crop in that way.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with saying, add a little bit more. One, straightening the horizon, you lose a few pixels on the edges. You never know. When you put things in frames, you're always going to lose a little bit of that quarter inch around the border. Sometimes if you crop in too closely, you've got to lose toes or fingers or whatever. And so you want to, shoot a little bit wider than what you think might. And also the aspect ratio of your camera may be a little bit different than what your final. You may end up in the end, it looks better as an 8x10 than the 4:6 ratio your camera's giving you. So, you know, maybe you want to think about that. But if you're thinking about all those things again, and, while you're taking the shot, maybe you take 2 or 3. You know, like I tend to take 2 or 3, click, 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 and now I've got the close in, the middle range, and
now
pull back a
I'm not
little bit.
wasting film. I'm just inconveniencing a few more electrons.
Yeah, all right.
One other thing I learned from the men going to the moon, when Armstrong first got out of the lunar module, one of the first things he did is grab some rocks and some dirt. They called them contingency samples, in case something went wrong and they had to rush back in and, you know, abort the rest of the mission and take off quickly. So, for example, when I went and got the picture of the falling water that I liked,
Oh, yeah.
I got there and I took 3 or 4 shots, even though there were people in the back, you know, because I don't know, it could start pouring down rain any second. You know, but I got my contingency shots, and I tend to do that if I'm out somewhere, you know, as opposed to in a more controlled setting.
Mm-hmm.
I'll set up and then I'll just take some quick shots just to make sure I get something.
Yeah. Good point. I'm a big proponent of just studying art in general. It'll help your photography immensely. Take an art appreciation course. Join MoCA, go see that. They rotate their exhibits out 3 times a year. There's always something new to see there. Develop a passion for art in general, and you'll get not only inspiration for your photography, but back to all these compositions. Everything we talked about here is not unique to photography. These are all things that apply to every form of art, 2D, 3D art all together. And you might start to see some of these examples in other forms. Philosophy as well, I think Mike's heard me talk about, Gestalt philosophy, and it's more of a psychology, I guess, than a philosophy. But I like the fact that they think, the thinking there is, well, art is a 3-part process. There's the artist, the creator of the object, that's you guys. There's the art itself, the photographs, but it really isn't art until somebody observes it. So it's not until you share it with your friends, you post it on Instagram, you print it out and hang it on your wall, and somebody observes that object, does it really become art. And I think about that a lot because I don't shoot pictures for myself. I shoot pictures for customers or other people or family or friends, right? Very rarely do I take a photograph just for my own enjoyment. And it's not, from a Gestalt perspective, it's not really art yet. And so think about that. Think about all the people and the things that your art's going to come into contact with. And for me, that forces me to try to better every time around. I got to outdo myself because, all these people are out there and they're consuming what I'm producing, and I want to make sure I'm always getting better. And so I think that's really important. And then my last bit was study photographers and their techniques. Take a look at, when you see a really interesting picture, decompose it. Think about all these things we talked about and say, why is that a good picture? When Bikuri did the Afghan girl, right? And this beautiful girl with his eyes and kind of dirty face and the big Afghan with a big shawl around her. Whatever they do, they all went out and replicated the shot. They replicated the shawl and the pose and whatever, but they missed it. That's not what makes that photograph so compelling. It's the fact that here was this very beautiful woman in a very, dire third world situation, yet you could still see her beauty coming through. That's what made that really, really powerful. Not the attire, not the pose, not even those compelling eyes she had in and of themselves. It was the fact that there was something there. That shot of Cassie with the fur thing, that's been done a bazillion times. People think, oh, it must be the fur. It's like, no, it's not the fur. That's not what makes the shot interesting. What makes the shot interesting is there's no distraction. It brings you to your model space. So if there's nothing interesting in your model space, Cassie's got those great freckles and stuff. Like, that's really what I was going to capture there. not the fact that there was a woman with a fur hood on her face. You know, you can put a fur hood on me, and that's not going to look very good, is it? So it's not the fur hood; it's something else. So it's important to take a look at that stuff and see if you can figure out for yourselves, what is it about that? Is it triangles? Is it visual weight? What is it about that shot that makes it really, really good? It's the colors, it's the whatever. So, you know, don't be afraid to kind of deconstruct stuff, because you'll find that, you know, once you get it, you say, oh, okay, I get that. Then you can apply that to your own. Okay, that's it. That's my spiel for the night.